We have here a Star Wars galaxy of power that the Republicans can't match, of three presidents, a former first lady and candidate, and then another former first lady, Michelle Obama, and she's going to speak too. I think it will give Harrison Walz a big lift, as Obama always does. Soaring rhetoric and probably some tears at the same time.
Democratic National Convention in Chicago is underway, and we're building up to that keynote speech from Kamala Harris as she's set to formally become the party's nominee for president. Here on Times Radio, you won't miss a moment with James Hansen hosting live coverage through Thursday night into Friday morning. Well worth tuning in for that. John Pino's here, takes over from 4 o'clock with Times Radio Drive. John, what's on your mind?
So I'm going to kick off looking at the Democratic Convention in Chicago and just taking a step back. Where we are now. Look, we know that Kamala Harris is the duly chosen nominee. She's the candidate for president. But today they're going to go through the business of ceremonially anointing her, the roll call of the states. They do love their drama at these American conventions. We're going to be hearing from Barack Obama, the newest thing that the Democratic Party has to royalty, sort of giving that royal blessing to Kamala Harris. And I'm just looking at that basic situation where we are now. For all the fact that the nomination is done, today is mostly ceremony, today is mostly theatre. Take a moment back. It's an astonishing story.
And what a turnaround.
You don't have to be a Democrat supporter. You don't have to be a woman. You don't have to be black. You don't have to be Indian to sort of get the importance and significance of Kamala Harris now being, as she is at the moment, in the bookies' odds and by the polls, the front runner to be the next president of the United States. And that is worth reflecting on a bit. And also contemplating where it could all go wrong for her, if it does go wrong, from here on in, because there's a lot of arguing still to go, and it's going to be a hell of a race.
Do you think Joe Biden should take a little bit of credit for what he's achieved? Looking at his whole career, yesterday he really sort of pushed his record, but he did say at one point in his speech, one of the most important thing I did when I became president is to pick Kamala Harris as my vice president.
Yeah. Well, sure. I mean, look, that last bit, picking her as vice president. I mean, look, he took a bit of persuading to stand aside and let her be the candidate, didn't he? And so you've got to look at that in its own political context. And he did his job and did it, I think in a way that was absolutely as much as anyone in that hall could expect. I mean, he spoke a lot about himself, but he's the president. And in America, you've got to get that the presidency in America has got a particular, unique authority to it. He was never going to completely sort of just abase himself to Kamala Harris in that speech. It's about the president looking down and giving that presidential blessing, which he did. And if there was bitterness there, and maybe he just gave a tiny hint of that when he spoke about being too old to be the runner, just a tiny hint.
Said he was too young to be a senator and then too old to be president.
To be president. Well, I think they're going to forgive him that. I mean, he got all the love that he could have hoped for, having taken the decision that he took. Even though, as I say, it took a bit of pushing. And who on earth, I wonder, could have anticipated the turnaround that there's been since he decided to do that? The way the polls have absolutely turned around in every swing state, bar North Carolina, on the last poll that I saw. Harris is ahead. Doesn't mean she's going to win it, but just look at that and look at the historic significance of where we are.
An extraordinary contrast as well, just before we go, John, because I know you were at the Republican National Convention, when you mentioned, Barack Obama, the closest thing they have to royalty, the Clintons are there. But you looked in contrast with Republicans, no Bush is there, none of the big sort of Republican beasts there to sort of carry on that tradition. The Republicans completely different, and of course completely different to the expectations of what we all thought was going to happen at this department. We all thought it was going to be a drab affair, people unhappy at their candidate, complete euphoria, completely different.
It is almost puzzling to think how, I don't know, complacent the Republican Party seemed at their convention a couple of weeks ago. As you say, that I was there in Milwaukee, as if they thought it was done and dusted, so there was no possibility of Biden stepping aside. But after the shooting in Pennsylvania, that certainly made it a possibility that the Democrats would think, hang on, we've got to do something about this, because there was an inevitable spike for Trump. And then what do? You look at Joe Biden and think, listen, if we weren't going to do anything before, we surely got to do something now. And duly they did.
Extraordinary stuff. John, I'm sure everybody's going to be tuned in to get your takes on the DNC. It's day 2, of course, of the Democratic National Convention in Chicago. Last night, Joe Biden called on Democrats to get out, vote for Kamala Harris, and praised the vice president.
She's tough, she's experienced, and she has enormous integrity. Enormous integrity. Her story represents the best American story. And like many of our best presidents, she was also vice president. That's a joke.
Louise Callahan is the Sunday Times US correspondent and is in Chicago covering the convention. Louise, good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you. How was Biden's speech received yesterday? I mean, it took him 4 minutes to start it because of the ovation he was getting when he got on the stage.
Yeah, and I think it was really clear that this was a speech that Joe Biden never wanted to give. You know, like he's the president of the United States. He thought until recently that he was going to be running for a second term. So, I mean, when he was speaking, I just kept thinking, I wonder how much of this would have been in his convention speech, you know, like accepting the nomination. And the way, I mean, the reaction was astounding. I mean, it kind of on the floor in the moments before he came on stage, everyone was running around handing out "We Love Joe" signs. You could even see Nancy Pelosi, who was kind of part of pushing him out, the former Speaker of the House, standing there saying, you know, "We love Joe," and kind of chanting along. I mean, it was this real outpouring of emotion, but at the same time, you know, it wasn't like he was joyously stepping aside after all these years of service. I think it was still quite clear that, you know, he wanted to be president again, and now he's been pushed out.
Kamala Harris made an unannounced appearance.
She made a couple, yeah. She turned up a couple of times. Kind of early on in the night, she came on stage and just said, you know, "Thank you, Joe, and we're going to do this." And later on, she came on stage with Biden and his family after his speech. And I think of course, everyone's looking forward to her speech later in the week.
What's on the schedule for today, Louise? Barack Obama is set to take the stage. Are we going to hear from the former First Lady as well?
Yeah, looks like it. So the Obamas are both scheduled to come on today, and I think, you know, that's the kind of the rock star attraction of this afternoon. But I will say another thing is that yesterday we saw, you know, because of this kind of, you know, like internecine debate between Biden and, you know, it's going to be him or Harris. I think a lot of the younger like talent in the Democratic Party has been kind of forgotten. Yesterday that was really on full display, and I think we're going to see that throughout the week. There are these amazing political talents in the Democratic Party. Raphael Warnock, a black senator from Georgia, gave a really incredible speech that I think people were really drawn in by. I think lots of people commented to me about that afterwards. And I think this is going to be. There's been so much frustration within that kind of younger generation of the party that they've been dominated by Biden about this struggle between Harris and Biden. And so now that throughout the week we're going to be seeing a lot more of that, more of this young talent that's coming out and speaking.
And you're starting to hear some of the lines come out. She's got a resume, he's got a rap sheet, was one that sprung out yesterday. And also, let's make this win so big that even he can't deny it. How much forging of what we're going to be seeing and the campaign trail, is happening right now?
Yeah, I mean, there's these kind of lines which are coming out, and they're really going for the freedom line with Kamala. So there's posters everywhere in a very like Barack Obama style here in Chicago, with this kind of like stylized profile of her face, and it says freedom underneath. It's very similar to those Barack Obama posters where it said hope.
Yeah.
And so she's really pushing ahead with that, and she's positing this, you know, the fight for abortion rights as the fight for freedom, reproductive freedom, you know, the freedom to, you know, marry who you want and to, you know, have children or not. And so they're trying to draw this contrast with the idea that the Republicans are trying to interfere in your personal life. And for that, they're kind of, you know, a lot of Americans have this incredibly strong sort of libertarian streak. And that's also, of course, a number of independent voters who they'll be targeting.
Louise, thank you so much for giving us your time. I really appreciate it. Louise Callahan is the Sunday Times US correspondent, speaking to us live from Chicago. Now, we can also speak to former Democratic staffer in Congress and columnist Bruce Wolpe. Bruce, good afternoon.
Great to talk with you. I'm in Colorado, and but close with what's happening in Chicago.
What did you make of Joe Biden's speech yesterday? We heard there from our correspondent, it was a speech he probably never wanted to give.
For sure, he never wanted to give it. What was amazing was he gave it within a month of his stepping aside. I thought in terms of delivery and content, it was probably the best speech of his presidency. It's what he'll be remembered for. But he was setting the stage for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. He said, I love my country. I love my job, but I love my country more. And he also really went with the knife unsheathed after Trump on several occasions to try and take him down. I thought it was as effective a presentation as it could be. The crowd loved it. And also, we'll never see anything like this again. We don't expect to. The last time this happened, 1968, Lyndon Johnson stepping aside because of the war in Vietnam, and he could not win the election in 68 because of that. But the party was divided. What you saw last night was the president stepping aside in the interests of his party and the nation, and a party united. I thought it was quite dramatic.
Now, we've been looking at the polling numbers, which have been creeping up for Vice President Harris ever since Joe Biden stepped down. Do you think we're going to see a further bump in the polls after the Democratic National Congress? Some people have said that actually perhaps they've plateaued, that bump already happened when the change of candidate happened. Is there further to go, do you think, after this convention?
I think so. If these days ahead are as powerful as they were last night, there's every indication that they will be. I mean, the whole story really has been, is this a summer romance or a long-term commitment? And we'll know starting next week whether, in fact, the momentum continues. I believe it will. Harris is essentially tied or slightly ahead of Trump on the national basis, but then she's really regaining in all those swing states and gaining in more swing states. In other words, she's expanded the electoral college map, and that's to her advantage. She's winning back young people clearly, and that's probably her strongest suit right now. She is gaining recovery of Black male voters and Hispanic voters, and she has 8 weeks to continue to do that. So I would say right now, yeah, she's on course to continue momentum. And then the next marker will be the debate with Trump on September 10th. And will that further continue her momentum? And will she do the reverse of what happened to Biden? I think she's ready for it. So yes, I see really open skies for her right now.
What about when we look into the polling, we see that Donald Trump is still trusted more than the Democrats when it comes to the economy. And we do know that the economy is one of the big issues that people vote on. So what do the Democrats need to do in order to get ahead of Donald Trump when it comes to the economy?
You're absolutely right on that. And on the other issue, which is a hot button, is immigration. Trump is seen as being the better manager on the economy, inflation, and immigration, and that is really tough. Also, 70% of the country of voters believe America's on the wrong track. That's a signal for change. So yeah, that's the mountain she still has to climb. I think if the Fed cuts interest rates in mid-September, that will give people some confidence that in fact inflation has moderated and that they can look ahead with more confidence. But if Trump wins, it's going to be because people do want protection on those big issues, and they would find her wanting and delivering it. But if she can continue this campaign, get their confidence, and it's bigger than those issues too. It's about bringing the country together, having a more decent president who stands for, who does truly want to govern instead of being the divider in chief. So can she win? Yes. Is it locked up? No. Some people are running away with their confidence. But the road is there for her to get this thing back, but it's still uphill for her.
Bruce, just before we go, what do you expect to hear from former President Barack Obama and Michelle Obama, who are going to be the big speakers of today? Feels like yesterday was all about Joe Biden. Are we going to see a shift in the convention now to look to the future, to look to Vice President Harris and, of course, Tim Walz?
I think that's exactly right. Obama became such a sensation because of his representation that there's not a blue America, red state America. We're the United States of America. He will carry that forward. It'll be a call to decency. It'll be a call to the better angels of our nature. And I think it will be a terrifically inspiring speech. We have here a Star Wars galaxy of power that the Republicans can't match, of three presidents, a former first lady and candidate, and then another former first lady, Michelle Obama, and she's going to speak too. I think it will give Harrison Walz a big lift, as Obama always does. Soaring rhetoric and probably some tears at the same time.
Bruce, thanks for giving us your time. I really appreciate it.
Me too. Thank you, Alexis.
Bruce Wolpe, their Democratic staffer in Congress.